Episode number 28 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My next guest is Sarah Clark. When Sarah was 28 years old, she received the diagnosis of premature ovarian failure. She accepted the diagnosis and had both her children through IVF. Years later, she realized that the root cause of her infertility was a food intolerance and later a gut infection. She is a certified life coach with accreditation from the International Coaches Federation and a health coach with training from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. She is the author of Fabulously Fertile, Supercharge Your Fertility Naturally, Fabulously Fertile Cookbook, and Fertility Preparation Program. Her fertility coaching program, which includes functional lab testing, supports couples to make diet and lifestyle changes that dramatically improve the chances of a healthy pregnancy and baby. On her Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, she shares that with functional medicine and natural fertility solutions, we can eventually reverse infertility. You could check it out on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. So welcome to the show.
Excited to be here.
So cool. A fellow podcaster.
That's right.
So you have a really interesting story. You went through your own fertility challenges and then years later found out that it had to do with a gut infection and food allergies.
Yeah, definitely. I was joked I was having these menopausal hot flashes in my early 20s. I remember I was in HR at the time and her fan on my face going menopausal hot flash, and turns out that's what it was. So I at that stage I had irregular periods, and then I had chronic yeast infections, I had this weird fungal rash on my chest. And then my skin was like really clear during my teenage years, and all of a sudden in my early 20s it started getting super greasy, and acne kind of came along. And then I had this plan. Well, I'm a planner, so I had a plan. I wanted to get married at 25 and then have my kids at 28. So got married at 25, and then my cycles were still irregular. So I went right to my OBGYN at 28, and then I was told I had premature ovarian failure, which is a loss of function of the ovaries before the age of 40. So I remember her reaching up and grabbing the IVF brochure and telling me the only way I'd ever have children is by using donor eggs. Mm-hmm. So I was, pretty obviously shocked about that and surprised, but because I'm a person of action, I went on a list for a donor egg and was lucky enough on the first fresh transfer to have our daughter, and Ava is 17. So this is back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah, this is back in the day when you said donor eggs and people are like, what are you even talking about? Like this, right. Cares? People didn't know what it was. And then I had, we had a couple embryos left over, and we wanted to have our kids close together. And I was, bound and determined to go back there after a year to use those embryos, and, really stressed out about it. And then, so those embryos didn't work, and then went on another list for a separate donor egg and had our son, and Will is 14. So, many years ago. And then really after I had my daughter, my health, it took a downward spiral. So I remember after I had her, I had 9 colds in 1 year. Every cold went to a sinus infection. I thought it was a great idea to take antibiotics for every sinus infection. And then I had like toenail infections. I had vertigo. I had chronic bladder infections. I was peeing blood. I became allergic to all the antibiotics. And then I had chronic yeast infections as well. And then that stage I took a life coaching course because I was going to bring coaching to the corporate environment. And then I had my own personal wake up call. And then that's when I discovered, then I decided to take a health coaching course. And then the health coaching course, that's when I discovered I had those food sensitivities. So for me,
wow, that's so interesting.
I know. So at the time I discovered it was, so dairy and gluten-free. And then later for me, I took out corn. So when I took those out, then all of a sudden the bladder infections, I wasn't peeing blood anymore. Those went away. The sinus infections went away. And then a couple of years after that, then I discovered I had a gut infection. So then healed the gut infections that I had, which I had H. pylori, and I had a streptococcus, and then I had yeast infection. So I had a fungal infection, so healed those. And then, but for me, it was too late. So I was 40. I was fully in menopause, and so my the reason why I'm helping couples that are going through this is really, if you're still cycling naturally, then there's things we can do with the tools of functional medicine to really get to the root cause and see why it's not working.
So you did health coaching, life coaching, and then you went back to school for functional medicine.
No, so I assembled a team. So on my team, I have a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner that I work with, and I also
Mm.
work with a therapist and a yoga practitioner. So we take a functional approach, and it's I've in health coaching I learned about functional medicine, and it's just I well functional medicine is the future of conventional medicine. It's progressive doctors that are moving to this model of healing patients, and then they no longer want to prescribe. They want to and manage illness and disease. They want to prevent it. So
Right.
looking at the whole body.
Yeah, and really understanding it, because I know lab testing is huge in figuring out what's going on with the gut and figuring out if there's any imbalances in the hormones, and also deficiencies in certain vitamins. And it's really a thorough from A to Z
Absolutely.
workup.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We
And you had did you have celiac?
No, so I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So for me, I'm extremely sensitive to gluten, but I don't have celiac. And a lot of times people, I think they go and get the celiac test, and there's like I think over 75 proteins, or sometimes I think over 75 proteins in gluten, and the celiac test only tests for one. So
Right.
there's a lot of false negatives. And the test we would recommend for seeing if there's a high sensitivity to gluten would be the wheat zoomer. There's a dairy zoomer and a wheat zoomer, so that looks for 26 proteins. But
Right.
typically for people that are trying to conceive, we say don't consume gluten or dairy for 90 days. See how you feel, and either you're pregnant naturally, or if that hasn't worked, then dig into the gut infection side of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the reason why I had a feeling you weren't celiac, but I do want to mention it because I think a lot of people think that you have to be celiac to be sensitive to gluten. People don't realize how many symptoms get alleviated just by taking it out of your diet.
Yeah, and it's also too with we're in the middle of this huge food experiment, so all of our food is filled or sprayed with glyphosate and herbicide and pesticides.
Right.
And I know I was just listening to a podcast the other day talking. I already knew this, but it just reaffirmed it because the guy was so awesome the way he was talking about it. But back in the 1990s, when they introduced glyphosate into the food supply, that's when the uptake in autoimmune disease, cancer,
Wow.
autism, heart disease, all these
That's
diseases
crazy.
have gone up, and so it's like affecting the food, and then also going into our water supply, and
Wow.
really to me, going 100% organic and non-GMO is an absolute must because
I agree.
we're in
I
the middle.
totally agree. I actually implemented, not just for myself, but also for my kids. They don't have any gluten and they're fine. Nowadays, they have so many alternatives. And I had one patient who came in, and she also was gluten free after coming to me, and then went to a cruise, ate some gluten, and felt horrible. And she said, I really feel a difference in my body. It's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah. So because I didn't figure out these food sensitivities until after I had my kids, so then I passed on, and they're both born via C-section, so they didn't get the beneficial bacteria from the birth canal.
Right.
Um, they both are predisposed to food sensitivities. My daughter had sinusitis and acne, and my son is more on the mood disorder kind of side of things. And so both are dairy and gluten free. They are teenagers, so I have to tell you, it's a nightmare to try to keep. I think my daughter at 17 finally, because she doesn't want to have acne. So for her,
Hmm.
and that if you've got acne,
Right.
it's a
Hey, vanity is a good reason
exactly. She's kind of
at
figured
that
out.
age.
Yeah. Whereas my son, trying, when he has it, it really affects his mood, and I'll just say, dude, that's not you. Like, I know that's
Yeah.
not you. That's because, and actually in this podcast, I
Oh,
was
listen, the gut brain.
absolutely, yeah, it goes to the neurological side of things first. That's with
Hmm.
autism, and we've got a whole crisis going on right now with mental health and depression and anxiety. Well,
Yeah.
why don't we back this up? And if we switch over to, because if we say going, if gluten free and dairy free is too much for you, like at least go 100% organic and non GMO, and
Right.
that, and see how you feel just doing that.
Definitely. It feels almost like an uphill battle just to be like non-toxic, you
Okay.
know, with a food and organic. And I mean, it really is. But once you do get into a routine, it's really not that bad.
No, like it's not about starvation. People say because I'm dairy, gluten, and corn free, and they're like, "Oh, what do you eat?" And I'm like, "I eat everything.
Yeah.
There's no starvation. It's not a green juice diet. It's not
Right.
restricting." And people get caught up in this whole calorie thing where it's like, don't count calories, count chemicals.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like that.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you, can you just explain for somebody who's never heard of what functional medicine is? How does that work?
Yeah, so basically it's looking at the root cause of disease or illness and really looking at different parts of the body. And so we use functional testing with this to start off. So we look at food sensitive. And I think for people, especially for fertility and really for any health issue, food is the last thing we look at. Whereas functional medicine, it's the first, because what you place
Hmm.
on your fork every day does matter. So looking at a food sensitivity test, and a lot of times, if we are potentially intolerant to these foods, um, is it the fact that these foods are sprayed with glyphosate?
Right. That's a good point. It's
Yeah,
true.
because the wheat crop was one of the first crops that was first sprayed. So is that why people are so intolerant to gluten? Is the fact it's sprayed with glyphosate, or is the fact it's the protein found in wheat, the gluten that's the causing the issue? So what, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. But
Right.
so we look at the food sensitivity test. We do a LEAP MRT test, and that looks at 200 foods and food chemicals. And we have people take out foods in the yellow for 60 days, foods in the red for 90. And then while we're waiting for the results of the food sensitivity test, we do an elimination diet. Elimination diet, you take out dairy, gluten, corn, soy, peanuts, and eggs for 10 days. Then you systematically reintroduce it.
Hmm.
And the reintroduction period is key. So it's not like a cleanse where after 10 days and then you're like eat a big pizza. This is the gold
Hmm.
standard of figuring out how food impacts your body. So really,
Right.
when you bring it back in, bring back in corn. I've had people bring back in corn, it flares up their asthma. Bring back in dairy, it can make them feel funny. Bring back in gluten, it can make them feel brain fog. So it's different for everyone to be able to see exactly how that affects you, because you can get the results
Good
of that food.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get the results of that food sensitivity test, and then people just get it and go, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? And throw it in a drawer somewhere, not do anything about it. But when they experience,
It's true.
most people
Yeah.
come, I know most people come in and they're like, oh, I eat healthy, I eat clean, I feel fine. Because people that I'm working with for fertility, they're not, they typically aren't feeling unwell. They're trying to have a baby. So,
Right. Right.
and then they don't know, sometimes you don't know how poorly you're feeling until you start to feel awesome.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. I always say that when I get a massage because I'm like, oh, no, I'm fine. I don't have any tight shoulders. And then as soon as somebody actually massages my back and relieves that pain, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize. But it really is. It's that's how it is. I mean, when I went to an acupuncturist years ago, it was the same kind of thing. You don't realize you're out of balance until you get balanced. And then you're like, wow, I didn't realize this.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so we look at the food sensitivity test, and then we look at a Dutch test. That was a dried urine test, and that basically looks at your sex hormones as well as your cortisol and your melatonin, and then and seeing exactly what's, because we work with people with like low ovarian reserve and unexplained infertility and premature ovarian failure, and so sometimes they'll come in and it'll show that their hormones are actually, their estrogen's actually fine. Other times it is
Hmm.
low on all sides, but sometimes it's not. So it's
Hmm.
really to see exactly what's going on with your hormones, and then we can develop a protocol based on that testing, and really also the cortisol levels to see. And we see this over and over again with people, issues with sleep. So just speaking to someone just before this, then she has celiac disease and insomnia. And
Right.
so, and you know, if you're not getting sleep is a cornerstone of health and fertility. So if you're dealing with insomnia, like what else is going on? Is there a gut infection because your melatonin is low and maybe that's
Sure.
impacting things? So it's really, instead of saying, oh, you're having poor sleep, let's give you melatonin, or let's give you a sleep aid. Well, let's see, well why is your sleep off to begin with? And dig,
Right.
and that's the approach of functional medicine. Like we keep digging in. And so looking at, like, it's a 20-page intake for the health history, asking questions about how you were as a baby. Like, were you colicky? Were you breast or bottle fed? Like, all, you know, when did you feel your best? When did you feel your worst? And a lot of times people come in with autoimmune diseases, and that's a huge clue. Um, or sometimes even looking at the blood chemistry review that we do, we don't diagnose. We're educators, but it's really to dig further in things that have been missed by conventional medicine. And it's kind of like your body wants to survive, not procreate. So to dig into that further. So we start with the food sensitivity test with like the LEAP MRT, and then we do the Dutch test, and then we do the GI map test, and that looks at the DNA of your stool. So the majority of people that we work with come back with some sort of a gut infection, be it a parasite, a worm, a fungal infection, a bacterial infection. There's something going on in the gut. And so really we start with gut health, like looking at the diet, healing the gut, because even at the food sensitivity test, as you heal the gut and get rid of those infections, then the food that you're intolerant to right now, you may not be intolerant to later. Unless it's a high red food, then we probably say we wouldn't bring that back in. But as you begin to heal your gut, taking out those infections, then you start to see shifts in your cycle, and shifts in all aspects of your life.
So how do you go about healing the gut if somebody comes in with like a major gut infection and
Yeah.
really horribly imbalanced, good bacteria?
Mm-hmm. So basically, we take a low and slow approach, and it's all professional grade supplements that are targeted depending on what it is we find that you have. So if there's parasite, then you're going to be using something to help with the parasite. So if you were to take this test to your conventional doctor, they potentially could recommend an anti-parasitic and antifungal. Things
Right.
like that is going to then kill all the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria. And so this is a low and slow approach, which will maintain the healthy bacteria in your gut. And so depending on what it, like, typically we'll recommend as a baseline for most people are going to be a good probiotic. We like Megaspore because it can actually, if there are parasites or anything else going on in your gut, it actually will still work. Some of the other probiotics will be canceled out if you're using antibiotic or any kind of other herbal remedy could cancel the probiotics. So this can be used in conjunction with antibiotics and other remedies. So that's Megaspore. And I had Karan Krishnan he's a microbiologist who helped design the Megaspore probiotic. And so we recommend that. And then we look at a prenatal. You want to make sure it's a methylated prenatal because
Right.
yeah, you don't want folic acid, so you want folate because 60%
That's
of people.
another thing in wheat. I mean, it's everywhere in wheat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and 60% of people have the MTHFR gene, so not being able
Right.
to methylate folate properly. So if we recommend to do that and not have anything that has folic acid in it. So looking at that, and then magnesium. I think over 85% of us are deficient in magnesium, so having a good magnesium and an omega-3 to help with inflammation. So those are kind of the basic ones, and then depending on what we find, then we would recommend a protocol to heal whatever it is. And a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I have candida or fungus," but so fungus or candida or yeast is opportunistic. And really, we would attack that last. So we look to see if there is a parasite or a worm.
Like an underlying
Yeah, a
reason
bacteria
for why. Yeah.
infection. So yeah, and depending on what it is, there's different supplements for that. But it's that target approach. You're not just like digging around in the dark, going, "Oh, what do I focus on?" And then we would retest at the end of that to make sure it's been eliminated. And a lot of times because there's biofilms on these in the gut, and so when you work with you use a protocol, you can then uncover other things underneath. And we often will find that where it may not present with H. pylori to start with, and then when we do the protocol, it could be hiding underneath, and so there could be other things. So it's always good to retest, make sure whatever's there has been eradicated.
Got it. Yeah, that's actually a good point because people think that once you test, you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And another thing too, I know for the gut, it's a very, very complex system because it's great to have probiotics, but it's also important to have prebiotics
Mm-hmm.
so they work together. So I know it's very complex in the way people treat it. And also, you kind of, it's like anything, you hear so many different theories that sometimes certain probiotics don't really help. And then it just that it's important to have prebiotics in order to prepare the gut to receive the probiotics.
Yeah, I think it's just important, like that you can do that with foods and stuff like that. So some of the
Yeah,
living greens for the prebiotics. Sometimes people do the kombucha or um,
fermented.
the kefir and stuff, but a lot of those are if you have a yeast issue, you don't want to do kombucha, it can make it worse.
Hmm.
A kefir, if it's on dairy, we wouldn't recommend that because a lot of times 60 to 70% of people are intolerant to dairy. So you
Right.
want to, if you do a coconut one. So some of that yeah, just to be careful what you're doing. For a probiotic, we like Megaspore, as I said, and because some of the
Mhm.
other probiotics could have dairy, so that would then, if you're
Right.
intolerant to dairy, kind of makes the whole thing worse.
Yeah, good point. There's so many different layers to it.
Absolutely, and it's really, and then as you start to work on the gut, and then we layer in those dietary changes. So and a lot of times people come back and they have a high gluten sensitivity, and typically, as we were talking about before, some of these tests, it's hard to see if there is a high gluten sensitivity, but actually on the stool test, we look at the gliadin and see if it's high there in the stool test, then we'd recommend being actually the whole household being gluten free, including your partner. Because
Really?
yeah, because if you have a high sensitivity to gluten and your partner's out there eating bread or having a beer, coming back and giving you a kiss, then
Interesting.
those little crumbs on your lips can then cause an immune reaction in you if you're highly sensitive. So we, not all the time, but we use the testing and then say, okay, wait a minute, if the partner's, especially if there's an autoimmune disease, if there's an
Hmm.
autoimmune disease, an absolute must to go gluten free.
I agree. I'm with you 100% on that.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different opinions on it, but I really do feel that it's super important. And there's a huge link with Hashimoto's and thyroid conditions.
Yeah, we see that a lot of times with unexplained infertility. It's actually undiagnosed Hashimoto's or an undiagnosed hypothyroidism. That sometimes people are like, oh, the TSH is fine, but then they haven't looked at either the antibodies to check the
Right.
Hashimoto's, or maybe the T4 is off, so maybe they're just on Synthroid, and they need to maybe go to a desiccated thyroid. So again, that's like we educate, we're not diagnosing. It's more like to say, okay, wait, look, have you looked at this stuff?
Right.
And then being able to then go to your doctor and talk to them about making some going, looking at a different thyroid medication. And also the thyroid's are the canary in the coal mine. Well, why is the thyroid off to begin with? Is there a gut infection? Is there a food sensitivity? Like, what are those other stressors? So you've got stressors in the body, could be a gut infection, a food sensitivity, environmental toxins. So maybe you've got all these, you've got the food issues with glyphosate coming in. So switching to organic. You could have plastics. You could have your personal care that are causing stress on the body. So all the toxins and the parabens and the phthalates, the phthalates
Right.
that are in
Yeah.
your personal care. Your cleaning products, you're inhaling all those. Your water, making sure it's purified. You've got fluoride and chlorine, especially fluoride if there's a thyroid issue. Making sure you get a good quality water purifier. I like the Berkey, Berkey, and that
Hmm.
one will filter out like all the different contaminants. So really looking at a good water filter, and then also on your shower, getting a water filter on your shower, because when we're in the shower, we're inhaling all the vapors that come out of the water, and that's actually even worse than drinking it. So
Right.
you can get a $30 or $40 water filter from. I have mine's from Berkey, so
Hmm.
pop it on there, and also makes your hair feel a lot softer too. So looking
Oh,
at
that's great.
water, yeah, and then looking at your feminine hygiene. That's the first step we take with our our couples in the coaching program is we're like, okay, let's go to a Diva Cup or use the Thinx underwear, which is period underwear, so THINX, or
Mm-hmm.
go to switch to organic or organic pads or tampons. Is really
Right.
putting that. It's again sprayed
It's
with
true. Yeah.
glyphosate in the most delicate area of your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then so those are the stressors. So you got the gut infection, the food sensitivity, the environmental toxins. Other stressors obviously are mental emotional stressors. So dealing with infertility is stressful in itself. So really
Mm-hmm.
being able to give voice to these emotions that you're dealing with. That's what we coach couples to have. A lot of times they haven't maybe even talked about how they feel about this, and or it could be that this is stereotypical, but the male partner is not able to voice his concerns because he's trying to really support the female when he's equally as hurting as much as she is, but
Mm-hmm.
he can't say it because he doesn't want to. He wants to be the strong one, which being able to give voice to that.
Right.
So the mental emotional side of things, and then also the structural side of things. So if you have a pinched nerve or something wrong with your back or whatever it may be, something out of alignment that could be causing stress on the body. So those are kind of looking at those different stressors.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a point there that's very connected to fertility, a couple of points, because
Hmm.
the kidneys are reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
So the lower back is usually where you would feel it if you have kidney deficiency of any kind.
Neat, yeah.
Interesting, right? How
Mhm.
everything kind of comes together.
Exactly. I just got these little ear seeds here from earseeds.com, and they've got there's one for fertility in there.
Hmm.
You can use, but I just got the one for stress. So I'm going to put them on here, but because you can I'm sure you probably use those too in between treatments, but you can actually use it kind of by yourself too. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's funny because I've actually I haven't given myself acupuncture in a while. And I'm like, I really need to get the needles in
Yeah.
because after a while you need it.
Yeah.
So that's great. And then you do the mindfulness fertility program. How does that work?
Yeah, so basically, I co-facilitate it with a therapist, and we're actually on week 2 right now in April, and we're basically it's incorporating mindfulness strategies to help deal with that mental emotional stressor. So looking at and it's based on the work of Alice Domar, who's a pioneer in mind body fertility, and she's a Harvard
Hmm.
researcher, and basically ran these mind body fertility groups for over 20 years, and found that 55% of them women that were in the group went on to get pregnant within 6 months, and then 2 years, 95% became mothers somehow. So
Mm,
it's really the mindfulness piece of this is huge because you
it
can
is
eat this beautiful healthy diet and do all these functional
true.
tests, but then if you're not getting control or giving voice to these these emotions that you're dealing with, that's equally as stressful on your body. So we, as in functional medicine, it's looking at everything. It's looking at your like all those different stressors
Hmm.
and addressing them, not all at once because that's like too overwhelming, but so with the mindfulness, it's adding in mindfulness to your day. So it could be you could do mindful hand washing, or you could do mindful eating, or you could do mindful walking, or you could like we recommend everyone's doing some meditation.
Hmm.
um, and we challenge people to do 20 to 30 minutes a day during the program. So, but that can be sometimes too much for people. So if they think of sitting, doing and meditating, and it'd be interesting to see if you do think it's too much. Kind of that's the resistance coming up, and kind of dig into that a little
Right.
bit more. Then,
Exactly. Exactly. Challenge that resistance.
yeah, I had that where I'm like, why do I not want to do this?
Right.
I'm like, tell me to do something, I'll get it done. I finally committed about a year and a half ago. I'm like, okay, I was, inconsistently meditating. And
Hmm.
I finally just said, you know what, enough's enough. Let's do this. And I went from 5 minutes down to, I'm at about 20 minutes or so now. That seems like the sweet spot. And,
It is.
yeah.
It is a sweet spot. 20 minutes is great. And
Mhm.
then eventually you almost want to do more because it just feels so good. And
Yeah.
how do you feel? How has it affected you?
Yeah, to me, it's the foundation of everything. It really
Yeah.
helps you to stay grounded, and instead of, as we talk about in the course, instead of reacting, you can respond, and then you can actually
Hmm.
see in this mindfulness course is also talking about like being able to see our patterns, because a lot of times we're going to do the same thing over and over again and kind of be able to see, well, that's interesting, why am I doing that, and being able to kind of be an observer rather
Hmm.
than reacting like a, we all have those default stress things, and whatever that may be. If you find yourself either snipping at your partner or like, getting freaked out in traffic or things that now you're snapping, it's kind of, to the mindfulness piece is a prevention. It helps
Yeah.
you be able to cope with all these different things in your life. And the foundation of this is, and the course we talk about, is self-care, to really um, put yourself first and to mother yourself
Hmm.
during
That's such a good point.
yeah,
Yeah.
before the child comes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like I feel so strongly about that. And I feel like that's so neglected with so many people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's so needed. And it really is the foundation. I mean, especially for women who are carrying the baby, you have to give yourself that love and that attention.
Yeah,
It's
it's really,
important.
yeah, it's important to really, that self-care piece. And there's a huge, buzzwords all about self-care, but self-care doesn't
Mhm.
mean mani-pedi. It could be, which, but that's still good.
Yeah.
Make sure it's a non-toxic mani-pedi.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it's like setting boundaries. It can be
Yes.
talking about, so for infertility, how do you want your friends to handle baby announcements? How do you
Mhm.
want your friends to handle shower invites? Or how do you want, if someone has a shower, maybe it's a close friend, you'll say, you know what, I'm going to go for the first hour and then I'm going to leave, and tell your friend that. So just, it's kind of educating people around you of how you want to be treated, or how you want this to work for you, because um, a lot of times well-meaning people say things that, when you're on the fertility journey, are extremely triggering. Next thing you know,
Mhm.
you've gone down a rabbit hole, and it's really to sort of educate that, you can start with the small people, a small group of people around you, and then when you feel you can tell more. But it might just be in the beginning, just a few people to say, this is what I would, this was what's going to make me feel good during this time. Because a lot of
Right.
times we don't ask for what it is we need, and we feel triggered by pregnant bellies and families, and um, we may feel broken. So this is things I see over and over again with coaching couples, and
Mhm.
to, first of all, be able to talk about that, because first of all, we start thinking, we judge ourselves, going, oh my goodness, I should be happy my best friend's pregnant. Why do I feel
It's true.
so jealous and envious? And, well, of course, because it's something that you want as well. So
Exactly.
release that judgment that you may be feeling.
It's so true. And you do a lot of different elements, which is the mind, the body, and you work on coaching. I wanted to ask you, what's a good number? Usually, I always say 3 months minimum. And what do you usually do with your clients
Yeah,
as far as how long you think?
so basically, yeah, it takes like 90 days for the egg to renew itself. The life cycle of the sperm is 70 to 80 days. So our programs are 6 months, because by the time you
Hmm.
make some of these changes, it does take a
Hmm.
little bit of time. So you start making these dietary changes, then you're going to look at the gut health, and you're going to do a gut health protocol. You're going to then weave
Hmm.
in these mindfulness strategies, talking about if there's issues. There's communication issues that can be improved with a relationship, even though, like, I'm coaching couples that are in love and want to have a baby, and it's still, but depending on how long they've been on the fertility journey, there's still stress in the relationship. So working through that piece of things, um, being able to visualize this thing is actually going to work, to
Hmm.
believe that it's going to work, to
Right.
get to that intuition side of things, that you can see it happening, and being able to visualize, yourself either pregnant with a little baby or with a toddler. It takes, sometimes people have a hard time visualizing that piece. So getting
Right.
to that can be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely is it is something that is hard because a lot of times people have had losses or miscarriages, and to actually go there is hard. And I know that a lot of times there's some subconscious resistance because of the pain that people have gone through. So it definitely is, it makes sense that 6 months, I mean, it definitely is a really long process that you really need to go through in order for the body to truly reflect all the changes that have been implemented.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, 6 months is like a drop in the water, like, to really
True.
to focus
Yeah.
on your health. So right now, if you're not able to have a child, so your body it wants to survive rather than procreate, there's a
Right.
reason. So to dig into that,
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
me, like, I've done a podcast on and talk about it all the time about why is the first step from the OBGYN to the RE, like, why is it that? Why aren't we just say, because to me, IVF should
It's
be your last.
true. You're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be your last step, and to look to see, using the tools of functional medicine, like, were you on long-term hormonal birth control, which then impacts the health of your microbiome, or your gut health, as well as your nutrient levels, so your ability to absorb foods. And, is that a clue? Like, what else is
Mhm.
going on here in the body? And to me, the IVF is there when you need it, but taking at least 6 months to focus on your preconception health, to improve, to get your relationship, to get you, like, mental, emotionally in a good stand, as well as the health of your body. um
Yeah.
and well, either it has a healthy pregnancy and then healthy postpartum period. When people are having health issues, and then, to me, barging ahead to IVF. Now, I went and did that, and I had a horrible postpartum. I didn't have postpartum depression. I didn't even know this was a thing until recently. Postpartum rage. I was just ticked off.
Mhm. Well, yeah. I mean, when your body's off, you're gonna really feel it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we spoke about at your podcast, you were talking about how some people don't perceive estrogen dominance as a thing. And I'm talking more for people who have like fibroids and endometriosis. You had spoken about that. What have you heard about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I just heard one person saying that, but then, everything that I've seen is that, if there is estrogen dominance going on, that's typically more with endo or fibroids, or even it could be actually with low AMH. We've seen where the estrogen is going down the wrong pathway. So looking at the Dutch test, it could be going down, like, the oxidative stress pathway, so the wrong pathway. So, yeah, to me, to have, and we would use supplements to help if there is estrogen dominance, typically DIM, or
Right. Dim is great. Yeah.
yeah, to use to help that. And then, is there, like, these xenoestrogens, so, like, the environmental toxins, so
Hmm.
the plastics, the clean, like, all those environmental toxins can then show up in the body as those
True.
xenoestrogens. And then
Yeah.
the
Definitely.
phytoestrogens, like soy, so, which is a top allergen, and then you're having soy, which, um, yeah, I think with that, we like the Dutch test. It just gives us a clear picture of what exactly is going on with the hormones. Because even with, like, low ovarian reserve, it could be that, actually, and a lot of times people with low ovarian reserve, they've been told to supplement with DHEA, and we're like, well, is it low? Do you know what it is? And the Dutch test will show you where it is.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know it was that accurate because I was looking into that and I know that it could be a 30-day thing, right?
Yeah, they have a cycle mapping one, and then they do. We use the I think it's Dutch Complete, and
Mhm.
it basically will on the 19th day of your cycle, so 5 to 7 days post ovulation. Then we'll do the test, and it's over 24 hours. So you have to do, I think, four collections, and you're just urinating on pieces of cardboard. But yeah, I had Dr.
Mhm.
Carrie Jones from Precision Analytical on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, and she
Mhm.
talked about it from. She's talked a lot on in other podcasts about with PCOS and more of the estrogen dominance thing. We talked more about if it's high FSH or low AMH,
Mhm.
and had to look at that. She talked about the thyroid and the cortisol, and so yeah, she's like super super smart. So,
Mhm.
that's a really good podcast to listen to, and she goes into detail about the Dutch in there.
And it doesn't test for AMH though,
No,
right?
no,
But it does estrogen, progesterone, cortisol.
melatonin,
Mhm.
DHA, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's great.
Hmm.
So yeah, I have to start looking into that because I heard a lot about the Dutch test.
Yeah, we use it for everyone, for all our clients. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So I know you offer some amazing freebies. So how can people access those?
Yeah, so there's a fertility diet freebie, so FREEBIE, fertility diet freebie, and you get a 3-day fertility diet challenge. So basically, So I've partnered with a chef who's trained at the Natural Gourmet, which is the top health-inspired chef's school in North America. And so she's developed the recipes that are all like awesome and fertility friendly, so free of the top allergens. So that's the fertility diet freebie. And then the other one I have is the yoga freebie. So I have a yoga instructor I work with, so fertility yoga. So fertility yoga is that yin and restorative yoga. So it's very slow. It might even be like, are you kidding me? This is so slow, I'm going to die. But that is the point. And to be able to, and it is very nourishing for the reproductive system. So doing poses such as legs up the wall and hip openers and very slow movements and ones you can do in bed too. So yeah, check that out. That's the yoga freebie. So yoga freebie.
Awesome. That's great. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so on the Get Pregnant Naturally is the podcast. They can find it on iTunes and Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. And also my website is fabfertile.com. So lots of other resources. And we just, I think we've had like almost 90 episodes on the podcast. So lots of really cool guests in the functional medicine field talking all about all things gluten and functional testing and gut health. So lots of really cool discussions on there.
Yeah, for sure. I've been listening and it's great information. So I definitely recommend it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was really interesting.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to leave a review. Reviews are everything to podcasters, and I will be giving shout outs to the usernames of reviews on future episodes. You can find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com. And please be on the lookout for my online course and program, which will be available online soon. This course has emerged from everything that I've been using for the fertility program I now offer at my office. I wanted to consolidate all of my suggestions and coaching and put it into a form that anyone can purchase and use. It was important for me to encompass key fertility health factors as well as guide you in implementing changes in your routine that are shown to boost fertility while being realistic and user-friendly. I will be offering this course with and without coaching. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com, where you can find the subscription form. I am also offering a discounted pre-registration price for a limited time. If you're interested in that, you can contact me on my contact page. I thank you so much for listening in and hope you have a beautiful day.